Richardson Mora drove through the Chicago snow without calling ahead. The deal in Milwaukee went bad, ended early, and he wanted his study, his whiskey, and silence. No lieutenants, no wife asking questions, just 1 hour of peace before the phone started again. He told himself it was strategy, returning unannounced. Really, he just wanted to prove he still had a home to come back to. The gate rolled open. The driveway was cleared. The lights in the east wing were on, warm and gold against the white sky. But when Richardson stepped through the front door, the house felt hollow. Not empty, hollow. Like the walls were holding their breath. He shook snow off his coat and took 2 steps toward his study. The marble under his boots echoed too loud. That was when someone moved fast from the side hall. A blur of dark blue fabric and silver gloves. A hand clamped over his mouth, firm and sure. Another hand locked around his wrist and yanked him backward into the shadows of the servants' corridor. Richardson's body moved before his brain did. His free hand shot toward his hip, reaching for the Glock that wasn't there. He tried to twist, to throw his weight, but the grip tightened and a voice hissed low against his ear. "Don't move, Mr. Richardson." Sophia. His maid. Her voice was steady, but her breathing was not. "If you take one more step, the man behind that door will put a bullet in your throat." Welcome to Soul Woven Stories. Before we continue with the story, please hit the subscribe button and turn on your notification bell. Comment your thoughts on the story and where in the world you are watching from. Richardson froze. His pulse hammered in his skull. Sophia pulled him deeper into the narrow corridor, past the coat closet, past the service pantry, into the small storage alcove where they kept the winter linens. She pressed him flat against the wall and cracked the door open, just enough to see through. Her gloved finger rose to her lips. Wait. Richardson's mind spun. Sophia had worked in this house for 3 years. She ironed his shirts. She poured his coffee. She was invisible, the way good help should be. But now her hand was still over his mouth, and her eyes were locked on the hallway beyond, sharp and unblinking, like she had been waiting for this exact moment. Footsteps crossed the marble. Slow, careless, familiar. Through the crack in the door, Richardson saw his wife step into view. Teresa. She wore the black silk robe he bought her in Seoul, the one with the red cranes embroidered on the back. Her hair was loose. She was laughing. Then another man appeared beside her. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark suit Richardson recognized from the docks. Fong Lu. Second in command of the triad crew that ran Chinatown. The same crew Richardson had a truce with. The same crew that smiled at his table and called him brother. Teresa leaned into Feng's shoulder, relaxed, easy, like they had done this 100 times before. "He should be gone another 2 hours, Teresa said. Her voice was light, almost bored. The Milwaukee deal was a setup. Your people made sure it fell apart, right? Of course, Feng said. He reached for the bottle of wine on the hall table. The 1995 Bordeaux. The one Richardson had been saving. Feng poured 2 glasses without asking. By the time he figures it out and drives back, everything will be ready. Clean, quiet, no witnesses. Teresa sipped the wine and sighed, annoyed. I told him to take the back roads. If he comes through the front gate, we'll hear the gravel. Marco's already in the study. He knows what to do. Richardson's legs went weak. Marco. His head of security. The man who checked every room before Richardson entered. The man who drove his daughter to school. Marco was in the study. Waiting. The dizziness hit him all at once. The headaches he had been ignoring. The nausea after breakfast. The way his hands shook when he held his phone. He thought it was stress. He thought it was age. But Teresa had been smiling at him every morning, handing him his green juice, kissing his cheek before he left. Sophia's grip on his wrist tightened. She must have felt him sway because she pulled him back, away from the door, and leaned close enough that he could smell the faint lavender of her soap. If you walk out there, she whispered, you won't make it to the driveway. Richardson stared at her. This woman who had moved through his house like a shadow. This woman whose last name he did not know. She had dragged him into the dark. She had stopped him from walking into his own execution. She had been watching. Listening. Waiting. Teresa's laughter floated through the walls. And Richardson realized the most dangerous place in the city was not the docks or the back alleys or the rival territories. It was here. His own home. His own bed. His own wine cellar. And the only person trying to save him was the woman he had never looked at twice. Sophia kept her hand on Richardson's wrist, counting seconds in her head. She had memorized the house's rhythm over 3 years. She knew when Teresa's meetings ended. She knew when the guards rotated shifts. She knew which cameras had blind spots and which floorboards creaked. She had learned to be invisible because invisible people see everything. And for the past 6 months, Sophia had been seeing too much. The late-night phone calls Teresa took in the garden. The envelopes delivered to the house when Richardson was gone. The way Marco started walking Teresa to her car every Thursday, his hand too familiar on her lower back. Sophia did not trust her instincts at first. She was staff. It was not her place to question. But then she found the pill bottles in Teresa's bathroom drawer. Tasteless. Dissolvable. The kind used to sedate animals before slaughter. Sophia started writing things down. Dates, times, names. She kept a small notebook in the lining of her work bag, hidden beneath the cleaning supplies. She did not know what she would do with the information. She only knew that if something happened to Richardson, someone would come looking for her too. How long have you known? Richardson's voice was barely a whisper, rough and raw. Sophia glanced at him. His face was pale. His jaw was tight. The man who walked into this house 15 minutes ago would have snapped her wrist for touching him. But the man standing beside her now looked like he had just watched his entire world turn to ash. Since September, Sophia said quietly. When she started meeting with the triads. I didn't know what to do. I thought about calling the police, but I am the police in this city, Richardson finished, bitter. There's no one to call. Sophia nodded. She released his wrist but stayed close, her back against the wall, her eyes on the crack in the door. I didn't know if you would believe me. I didn't know if you would listen. So I just kept watching. And waiting. And praying you would come home early. Why? Richardson turned to look at her fully for the first time. His eyes, dark and sharp, searched her face. Why didn't you run? Why didn't you just leave? Sophia met his gaze. Because they would have killed me anyway. The invisible ones always disappear first. Richardson felt something cold settle in his chest. She was right. Teresa would have tied up every loose end. The maids, the drivers, the cooks. Anyone who might have seen too much. Sophia had not saved him out of loyalty or affection. She saved him because her life was tied to his. What now? He asked. Sophia pulled a small silver key from her apron pocket. There's a service door at the back of the corridor. It leads to the old wine cellar. From there, we can get to the garage without passing any cameras. My car is parked outside the gate. I moved it this morning, just in case. Richardson stared at the key. Then at Sophia. This woman had mapped out an escape route. She had moved her car. She had been preparing for this moment while he walked around blind and arrogant, trusting his name to protect him. They're going to realize I'm not in the study, Richardson said. I know. Sophia tucked the key back into her pocket. We have maybe 10 minutes before Marco checks the security feed. Maybe less. And then? Sophia's expression did not change, but something flickered in her eyes. Fear, maybe. Or resolve. Then the dragon of Chicago learns how to disappear. Richardson pressed his eye to the crack in the door, his breath shallow and controlled. Sophia stood behind him, one hand still resting on his shoulder, ready to pull him back if he moved too fast or made a sound. The corridor smelled like lemon polish and dust. His knees ached from crouching. He did not care. Through the narrow gap, he could see Teresa lift the wine glass to her lips. The crystal caught the light from the chandelier, throwing small rainbows across her throat. She drank slowly, like she was savoring it. Like she had earned it. Fong stood beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. He refilled her glass without asking, the wine pouring dark and smooth. To freedom, Teresa said, raising the glass again. Her voice was soft, almost tender. Richardson had not heard that voice in months. Maybe years. She used to speak to him that way, back when they first met in Seoul, when she still looked at him like he was someone worth knowing. Fong clinked his glass against hers. To new partnerships. They drank together. Teresa smiled, and it was the kind of smile Richardson had seen her give to donors at charity galas, to journalists at press events, to anyone she needed to charm. Beautiful and empty. A tool she had sharpened over a decade of being his wife. How much did you give him this morning? Fong asked. He set his glass down on the hall table, casual, like they were discussing the weather. Enough to keep him slow, Teresa said. Not enough to make him suspicious. He's been complaining about headaches for weeks. I told him it was stress. He believed me. She laughed, light and careless. He always believes me. Richardson's jaw clenched. The green juice. Every morning for the past month, Teresa had handed it to him with a kiss on the cheek. Spinach, ginger, apple, turmeric. She said it would help with inflammation. She said she was worried about his health. And he had drunk it every single time, standing in their kitchen, watching her smile. What about the body? Fong said. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. A map, maybe. Or instructions. Your people need to move fast once Marco finishes. The dock crew is ready, but the window is small. 2 hours, maybe less. Teresa took the paper and glanced at it, unbothered. The furnace at the old meatpacking plant on 35th. It still runs. Marco knows the route. We'll take the service cars, the ones without trackers. By midnight, there won't be anything left to find. Richardson felt his stomach turn. The meatpacking plant. He owned that building. He had bought it 5 years ago as a front for moving shipments through the South Side. Teresa had signed the paperwork with him. She had stood beside him at the closing, her hand in his, smiling for the cameras. And now she was planning to burn him there. What about the organization? Fong asked. His lieutenants won't just fall in line. Some of them are loyal. Some, Teresa agreed. She sipped her wine again, slower this time, thinking. But loyalty is expensive. And most of them are tired of Richardson's rules. No drugs in the schools. No trafficking. No unnecessary violence. She said the words like they were weaknesses. You offer them more money and fewer restrictions, they'll come around. The ones who don't. She shrugged. Marco has a list. Fong nodded, satisfied. He checked his watch, then looked toward the hallway that led to the study. How much longer? 10 minutes, Teresa said. Maybe 15. Marco's waiting for the signal. Once Richardson walks through that door, it's done. Clean shot to the back of the head. He won't even see it coming. Good. Fong raised his glass one more time. To the dragon's fall. Teresa smiled and touched her glass to his. To the dragon's fall. They drank. The wine disappeared. And Richardson watched his wife, the woman he had built an empire for, the woman he had protected and loved and trusted, toast to his death like it was a business transaction. Sophia's hand tightened on his shoulder. She leaned close, her lips barely moving. We need to go. Now. But Richardson could not move. He stood there, frozen, staring through the crack as Teresa set down her glass and smoothed her robe. She looked beautiful. She looked calm. She looked like a woman who had been planning this for a very long time. And Richardson realized he had never known her at all. Sophia tugged Richardson's sleeve once, sharp and urgent. He tore his gaze away from Teresa and followed her deeper into the corridor. The walls here were narrower, painted a dull cream that had yellowed over the years. No artwork. No mirrors. Just exposed pipes and the faint hum of the heating system running through the bones of the house. Sophia moved fast but silent, her shoes making no sound on the concrete floor. Richardson tried to match her steps, but his boots were heavy, made for intimidation, not stealth. Each footfall echoed too loud in his ears. He felt clumsy, exposed, like a man wearing someone else's skin. She stopped at a junction where 3 corridors split in different directions. Richardson had lived in this house for 8 years. He had never seen this hallway. Sophia did not hesitate. She turned left, then immediately right, leading him past a service elevator he did not know existed. "The cameras," Richardson whispered. His voice sounded strange, too rough for the silence. "They'll see us." Sophia shook her head without looking back. "Not here. The service areas aren't monitored. Your security team decided it wasn't worth the cost. Too many blind spots, too many staff coming and going. They only watch the main floors." Richardson felt something bitter rise in his throat. He had signed off on that decision. He had trusted Marco to handle security. And Marco had left the entire underbelly of the house unwatched because it seemed insignificant. Because no threat could come from the invisible people. They passed a storage room filled with linens, then a narrow kitchen used only for staff meals. Sophia slowed near a door marked electrical, pulled a keyring from her apron, and unlocked it. Inside was a small utility room, cramped and hot, filled with breaker boxes and bundled cables. She closed the door behind them and leaned against it, listening. Richardson could hear voices above them, muffled through the ceiling. Footsteps moving fast. Someone shouted. Marco, maybe. Or one of the guards. They had realized he was not in the study. "How long have you been mapping this?" Richardson asked quietly. Sophia glanced at him, her face unreadable in the dim light from the single bulb overhead. "Since the first week I started. Teresa told me to learn the house. She said a good maid knows every corner, every shortcut. So I learned." She paused. "I just didn't think I'd need it like this." Richardson looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time since she had pulled him into the shadows. She was younger than he thought. Maybe late 20s. Her uniform was pressed and spotless despite everything. Her hands, still gloved, were steady. She had the kind of face that people forgot easily, soft and unremarkable, the kind that blended into crowds. But her eyes were sharp, calculating, like she had spent years learning how to see without being seen. "Why didn't you run?" he asked again. The question had been burning in his chest since the corridor. "You could have left this morning. Packed a bag, driven to another city. You didn't owe me anything." Sophia's expression did not change, but something flickered across her face. Exhaustion, maybe. Or resignation. Because Teresa had my sister's address written down in her planner. Right next to a phone number I didn't recognize. And because invisible people don't get to run. We only get to survive. The words hit Richardson like a fist. He had built his empire on loyalty, on the idea that people stayed because they respected him, because he was fair, because he was strong. But Sophia had stayed because leaving meant death. And she had saved him not out of loyalty, but out of necessity. Because his survival was tied to hers. Sophia pressed her ear to the door, listening. The voices above had moved toward the east wing. She waited 10 more seconds, counting under her breath, then unlocked the door and stepped out. "The wine cellar is 2 floors down," she said. "There's a service stairwell behind the laundry room. No cameras, no guards. But we have to move fast. Once they check the footage from the front entrance, they'll know you didn't make it to the study." Richardson nodded. His legs felt heavy, his body slow. The poison was still working through his system, dulling his reflexes, clouding his thoughts. He had always been the predator in this city, the man who walked into rooms and made people nervous. Now he was the prey, stumbling through his own house, dependent on a woman whose last name he still did not know. Sophia led him through another corridor, past the laundry room, past shelves stacked with cleaning supplies. She stopped at a metal door marked basement access and pushed it open. The stairwell beyond was dark and steep, lit only by emergency lights that cast everything in sickly green. Stay close, Sophia said. And don't touch the railing. It creaks. Richardson followed her down into the dark. The wine cellar smelled like oak and stone and decades of expensive decisions. Richardson had not been down here in months. The bottles stood in perfect rows, organized by region and year, each one worth more than most people earned in a month. He had built this collection the way he built everything else, carefully, methodically, as proof that he had arrived. Now he was using it as an escape route. Sophia moved between the racks, her fingers trailing along the wooden shelves until she found what she was looking for. A small door, painted the same gray as the walls, nearly invisible unless you knew where to look. She pushed it open and cold air rushed in, carrying the smell of gasoline and winter. The garage. Richardson could see his cars lined up in the dim light. The Bentley, the Mercedes, the blacked-out SUV he used for business. All of them traceable. All of them marked. Sophia walked past them without a glance and headed toward the far corner where the staff vehicles were parked. Her car sat alone near the service exit, a 15-year-old Toyota sedan with a dented bumper and rust spreading along the wheel wells. She unlocked it and opened the back door. Get in. Stay low. Don't sit up until I tell you. Richardson stared at the car. At the torn upholstery and the fast food wrappers on the floor. At the child's car seat strapped in beside the back row. He had never thought about Sophia having a life outside this house. He had never thought about her at all. Your jacket, Sophia said, her voice flat. Take it off. It's too recognizable. Richardson looked down at himself. The tailored black coat, the silk shirt underneath, the silver cufflinks shaped like dragons. He had put this outfit on this morning in his bedroom, standing in front of the mirror, adjusting his collar. He had looked like a king. Now Sophia was telling him to strip. He shrugged off the coat and handed it to her. She took it without comment and stuffed it into a garbage bag she pulled from the trunk. His shirt was next. The white silk with his initials embroidered on the cuff. Sophia handed him a gray hoodie from the back seat, worn and faded, 2 sizes too small. Put it on, she said. And cover your neck. Richardson's hands moved to his throat instinctively. The tattoos. The dragon that coiled from his collarbone to his jaw, black and red ink that had taken 3 artists and 20 hours to complete. Everyone in Chicago knew that tattoo. It was his signature, his brand, the mark that said he was untouchable. He pulled the hoodie on and zipped it up to his chin. It smelled like laundry detergent and something sweet, like vanilla. It smelled like someone else's life. He climbed into the back seat and lay down across the worn upholstery, folding his body into the cramped space. His knees hit the back of the driver's seat. His head pressed against the opposite door. He could see the ceiling of the car, stained and sagging, and the child's car seat next to him with cartoon characters on the fabric. Sophia slid into the driver's seat and started the engine. It coughed once, then caught. She adjusted the mirror, checked the exits, and pulled out slowly, the tires crunching over gravel. Richardson felt every bump, every turn. His body ached. His head throbbed. He stared at the ceiling and tried not to think about how small he had become. What's your last name? He asked. His voice sounded hollow in the confined space. Sophia glanced at him in the rearview mirror. Williams. Sophia Williams. Richardson said the name out loud, testing it. 3 years. She had worked in his house for 3 years, cleaned his floors, washed his dishes, ironed his clothes. And he had never asked. Do you have kids? He asked, nodding toward the car seat. A daughter. She's 4. Sophia's voice was careful, guarded. She stays with my sister during the week. I see her on Sundays. Richardson closed his eyes. He had walked past Sophia 1,000 times. Had handed her his empty coffee cups. Had nodded at her in the hallway without really seeing her face. And she had a daughter. A whole life that existed in the margins of his empire. Where are we going? He asked. South Side, Sophia said. My neighborhood. It's not safe, but it's safer than anywhere else right now. No one will look for the Dragon of Chicago in a place like that. Richardson felt the car turn onto the main road. He could hear traffic now, distant sirens, the hum of the city moving around him. He had built this city. He had controlled it. And now he was hiding in the back of a rusted sedan, wearing a borrowed hoodie, running toward the one place his name meant nothing. The tattooed king, stripped and unmasked, dependent on a woman whose last name he had just learned. Sophia pulled the car into a neighborhood Richardson had only ever seen from the highway. Rows of narrow houses pressed together like broken teeth, their porches sagging under the weight of too many winters. Chain-link fences separated tiny yards. Streetlights flickered, some working, most not. This was the South Side, the part of Chicago his organization moved through but never stayed in, the part he had written off as territory not worth fighting for. She parked in front of a brick two-flat with bars on the windows and a porch light that buzzed like an angry wasp. "Stay in the car," she said. "I need to make sure it's clear." Richardson watched her walk up the steps and unlock the door. She disappeared inside for less than a minute, then reappeared and waved him forward. He pushed himself up from the back seat, his body stiff and aching, and stepped out onto the curb. The cold hit him immediately, sharper here without the shelter of his estate's walls. He pulled the hood up over his head and kept his chin down, but he could still feel eyes on him. Across the street, an old man sat on his porch despite the cold, a blanket across his lap, a cigarette burning between his fingers. 2 houses down, a woman stood in her doorway, arms crossed, watching. A group of teenagers leaned against a car at the corner, their conversation dying as Richardson passed. He did not look like anyone who belonged here. Even in the borrowed hoodie, even with his tattoos covered, he moved wrong. Too controlled. Too aware. A predator trying to play prey. Sophia held the door open. Inside. Now. Richardson climbed the steps and slipped through the door. The apartment was small, maybe 400 square feet. A couch that had seen better decades. A kitchen table with mismatched chairs. Toys scattered across the carpet, blocks and dolls and coloring books. The walls were covered with photos, dozens of them, held up with thumbtacks and tape. A little girl with Sophia's eyes smiled from nearly every frame. Sophia locked the door behind them, then pulled the curtains shut. She moved through the apartment with the same efficiency she used in his mansion, checking windows, locking the back door, turning off lights they did not need. Richardson stood in the center of the room, unsure where to put himself. He had commanded boardrooms, negotiated treaties in warehouses, stared down armed men without flinching. But here, in this tiny apartment that smelled like cinnamon and laundry soap, he felt like an intruder. "Sit," Sophia said, nodding toward the couch. "You look like you're about to fall over." Richardson sat. The cushions sagged beneath him, springs poking through the fabric. He could hear everything in this building. Footsteps above. A television through the wall. A baby crying somewhere close. In his house, the walls were thick enough to swallow sound. Here, everyone lived on top of each other, their lives bleeding together. Sophia disappeared into the kitchen and returned with a glass of water. "Drink it. All of it. Whatever Teresa gave you, you need to flush it out." Richardson took the glass and drank. The water was lukewarm and tasted faintly of metal, nothing like the filtered water in his house. But it was clean, and he was thirsty, and he emptied the glass without stopping. "How long have you lived here?" he asked. 5 years. Since my daughter was born." Sophia sat down in the chair across from him, her posture still perfect despite the exhaustion creeping into her face. "The rent's cheap. The neighbors mind their business. Mostly. They saw me," Richardson said. "They'll talk." "They'll talk," Sophia agreed. "But not to your people. Not to the police. Not to anyone outside this block." She leaned forward, her hands clasped between her knees. "You don't understand how it works here. People in this neighborhood, they know what it means when someone shows up looking scared. They know what it means when someone needs to disappear. And they know that snitches don't last long." Richardson studied her face. "You have a reputation here." "I help people," Sophia said simply. "Mrs. Chen 2 doors down, I watch her grandson after school. Mr. Walker across the street, I drive him to his dialysis appointments. The teenagers on the corner, I give them food when their parents can't. People here know me. They trust me. And if I say you're with me, they won't ask questions. A knock came at the door, 3 quick taps. Sophia stood and looked through the peephole, then opened the door just wide enough to speak. Richardson could not see who was outside, but he heard a woman's voice, low and concerned. Everything okay, Sophia? We saw you bring someone in. It's fine, Mrs. Patterson. Just a friend who needed a place to stay. He looks like trouble. He is, Sophia said. But he's my trouble. There was a pause. Then the woman spoke again, quieter. You need anything, you knock. I got my son's gun if things go bad. Thank you. Sophia closed the door and locked it again. She turned to Richardson, her expression unreadable. That's how it works here. We protect our own. Richardson sat on the sagging couch, his empire crumbling miles away, and realized the Dragon of Chicago was alive only because a maid had a daughter and neighbors who cared. Sophia pulled a cardboard box from beneath her bed and carried it to the kitchen table. Richardson watched from the couch as she opened it carefully, like it contained something fragile or dangerous. Inside were folders, envelopes, and a small black notebook bound with a rubber band. She removed the notebook and set it in front of him. This is everything, she said. 6 months of watching. 6 months of writing it down. Richardson picked up the notebook. The cover was plain, the kind you could buy at any drugstore for $2. He slipped off the rubber band and opened it. The first page was dated September 12th, written in neat, precise handwriting. Teresa met with unknown male, Asian, approximately 40 years old, at Lincoln Park Conservatory, 2:30 p.m. Conversation lasted 18 minutes. Teresa handed him an envelope. He handed her a phone. Richardson turned the page. More entries. More dates. Teresa's schedule mapped out in careful detail, cross-referenced with times Richardson had been out of town. October 3rd, Teresa left house at 11 p.m., told Richardson she was visiting her sister. Drove to Chinatown instead. Met same man from September. Stayed 2 hours. Returned home at 1:30 a.m., lipstick smudged. He kept reading. The entries grew more detailed as the months progressed. Names appeared. Fong Lu. Marco Delgado. Men Richardson trusted, men he had promoted, men he had considered brothers. Sophia had documented every meeting, every phone call she overheard, every suspicious interaction. She had drawn connections, marked patterns, noted when Teresa's behavior changed. How did you get all this? Richardson asked. His voice was rough, his throat tight. Sophia sat across from him, her hands folded on the table. I listened. I watched. I followed her sometimes, on my days off, when she thought no one was paying attention. Teresa treats staff like furniture. She talks in front of us like we're not even there. She makes phone calls while I'm cleaning her bathroom. She leaves papers on her desk when I'm dusting. She never thought I was smart enough to put it together. Richardson looked up from the notebook. You followed her. On your own time. I had to know, Sophia said. Once I saw the first meeting, I couldn't ignore it. And once I started writing things down, I realized how deep it went. It wasn't just an affair. It was a plan. A long, detailed plan to take everything you built and hand it to someone else. She reached across the table and flipped to a page near the middle of the notebook. A hand-drawn diagram filled both pages, boxes connected by lines, names written in different colors. At the center was Teresa's name. Around her, spreading like a web, were the names of Richardson's lieutenants, his accountants, his lawyers. Red lines connected Teresa to Fong Lu. Blue lines connected Fong to the triads. Black lines connected Marco and 3 other guards. Beside each name, Sophia had written dates, amounts of money, locations of meetings. This is an organizational chart, Richardson said slowly. You mapped the entire conspiracy. I used to be an analyst, Sophia said. Before my daughter was born. I worked for a private intelligence firm in D.C. Nothing glamorous, just corporate espionage, tracking competitors, building cases. When I got pregnant, they let me go. No maternity leave, no severance. I moved to Chicago to be near my sister, took whatever work I could find. She paused, her eyes steady on his. Being a maid pays better than you think. And no one ever suspects the help of being smart. Richardson stared at her. 6 months. She had been running a surveillance operation inside his own house for 6 months, documenting his wife's betrayal with the skill of a trained professional. And he had never noticed. He had walked past her in the hallways, handed her his dirty dishes, nodded absently when she said good morning. He had seen a maid. She had been building a case. Why didn't you come to me? He asked. If you knew all this, why wait? Sophia's expression hardened. Because I didn't know if you were part of it. For all I knew, this was your plan too. A way to stage your own death, disappear with the money, leave Teresa holding the blame. I've seen it before. Powerful men don't stay powerful by being predictable. Richardson felt the words like a slap. She had not trusted him. She had watched him the same way she watched Teresa, waiting to see which side he was on. And she had been right to wait. If she had come to him 2 months ago, would he have believed her? Or would he have fired her, maybe worse, for daring to accuse his wife? When did you decide I wasn't part of it? He asked. This morning, Sophia said quietly. When you walked through that front door without calling ahead. You looked surprised. Relieved, even. Like you actually wanted to be home. That's when I knew. You had no idea what was waiting for you. Richardson closed the notebook and set it down carefully. His hands were shaking. Sophia had saved his life not once, but twice. First by pulling him into the shadows. Second by spending 6 months making sure she understood exactly who the enemy was. You're not a maid, he said. No, Sophia agreed. But it's a good cover. Richardson looked at her, this woman who had stayed invisible while seeing everything, and realized he had been running an empire with his eyes closed. The knock came at 4 in the morning, hard and deliberate, 3 sharp strikes that made the door rattle in its frame. Richardson was awake instantly, his body flooding with adrenaline despite the poison still sluggish in his veins. Sophia sat up from the chair where she had been dozing, her hand already reaching for something beneath the cushion. Stay down, she whispered. She moved to the window and pulled the curtain back just enough to see the street. Her face went rigid. It's Marco. Richardson's blood went cold. Marco Delgado. 6'3", 240 pounds, former Army Ranger, the man Richardson had trusted to protect his family. He was standing on the porch below, alone, his hands in his coat pockets. No other cars on the street. No backup visible. But Marco never worked alone. How did he find us? Richardson asked, his voice barely audible. The car, Sophia said. She let the curtain fall and turned to face him. It's registered to me. It took him a few hours, but he ran the plates. She pulled a snub-nosed revolver from beneath the chair cushion, checked the cylinder, then looked at Richardson with an expression that was almost apologetic. I'm sorry. I should have thought of that. Another knock. Harder this time. Then Marco's voice, calm and patient, the same voice he used when explaining security protocols. Sophia. I know you're in there. I know he's with you. Open the door. We can talk about this. Sophia moved to the kitchen, crouching low, and gestured for Richardson to follow. He crawled across the floor, his body clumsy and heavy. The apartment felt impossibly small now, the walls closing in. There was one way out, through the front door, and Marco was standing right there. Mr. Richardson, Marco called. Boss. You're sick. Teresa told me. She's worried about you. Let me take you to the hospital. We'll get you checked out, make sure you're okay. Sophia positioned herself beside the door, her back against the wall, the revolver held low. She looked at Richardson and mouthed 2 words, he's lying. Richardson nodded. He knew. Marco's voice was too steady, too controlled. This was not concern. This was a cleanup job. The door exploded inward with a single kick. The frame splintered, the lock tearing free from the wood. Marco stepped through, a silenced pistol already raised, his eyes scanning the apartment with mechanical precision. He saw Richardson first, crouched near the kitchen counter, and the gun swung toward him. Sophia fired. The revolver's blast was deafening in the small space. The shot caught Marco in the shoulder, spinning him sideways. He grunted, more surprised than hurt, and turned toward her. His pistol barked twice, muffled coughs that punched holes in the wall behind where Sophia had been standing. But she was already moving, diving behind the couch. Marco advanced, bleeding but steady, his training overriding the pain. Richardson scrambled backward, his hands searching for anything he could use. His fingers closed around a cast-iron skillet on the stove. Marco's gun swung toward him again, and Richardson threw the skillet with everything he had left. It hit Marco square in the face, a wet crunch of metal against bone. Marco staggered, blood pouring from his nose. Sophia rose from behind the couch and fired again. This shot hit Marco in the thigh. He dropped to one knee, his pistol clattering to the floor. But even wounded, even bleeding, Marco was not finished. He lunged forward, his hands reaching for Richardson's throat. 240 pounds of muscle and rage crashed into Richardson, slamming him back against the counter. Richardson's head cracked against the cabinet. Stars burst across his vision. Marco's hands closed around his neck, thumbs pressing into his windpipe. Richardson clawed at the hands, tried to pry them loose, but his strength was gone. The poison had taken too much. He could feel his body shutting down, his vision narrowing to a black tunnel. Then Sophia was there, pressing the revolver against the base of Marco's skull. Let him go. Marco froze. His hands loosened but did not release. You won't shoot, he said, his voice strained. You're not that kind of person. You don't know what kind of person I am, Sophia said. Her voice was flat, emotionless. You never bothered to ask. She pulled the trigger. The sound was muffled this time, absorbed by Marco's skull. His body went slack, collapsing onto Richardson like a felled tree. Richardson shoved the corpse aside, gasping, his throat burning. He rolled onto his side and vomited, his body rejecting everything, the poison, the fear, the violence. Sophia stood over Marco's body, the revolver still in her hand, smoke curling from the barrel. Her face was blank, emptied of expression. She had just killed a man in her living room, 3 feet from her daughter's toys. Are you okay? She asked, her voice distant. Richardson coughed, spat blood. No. Can you walk? I don't know. Sophia set the revolver on the table and pulled him to his feet. We have to go. Now. Marco didn't come alone. His partner will be coming up those stairs any second. Richardson looked at the door, at the splintered frame, at the body leaking blood onto Sophia's carpet. Where? Somewhere they won't look, Sophia said. She grabbed her notebook, stuffed it into her bag, and pulled Richardson toward the back window. Somewhere they don't control. She pushed the window open and climbed out onto the fire escape. Richardson followed, his legs shaking, his vision still blurred. Behind them, he could hear footsteps pounding up the stairs. Sophia had saved his life again. And this time, it had cost her everything. They ended up in a 24-hour laundromat 6 blocks away, hiding in the back near the industrial dryers that ran hot enough to make Richardson sweat through the borrowed hoodie. Sophia had pulled 2 burner phones from her bag, cheap prepaid flip phones still in their plastic packaging. She cracked them open with practiced efficiency, installed the batteries, and handed one to Richardson. 10 minutes per call, maximum, she said. After that, we dump the phones and move. Richardson stared at the phone in his hand. It weighed almost nothing, a plastic toy compared to the encrypted smartphone he usually carried. He tried to remember the numbers he needed. He had stored everything digitally for years, trusting his phone to remember what he could not. Now his phone was sitting on his office desk, probably already in Teresa's hands. But some numbers stayed. The ones that mattered. The ones he had memorized back when he was still climbing, when survival meant knowing who to call when everything went wrong. He dialed. The phone rang 4 times before someone picked up. Yeah. The voice was rough, suspicious. Lee Park. Second-generation Korean, ran the shipping operations at the port, had been with Richardson since the beginning. "It's me," Richardson said. Silence. Then, carefully, "Boss? Don't say my name. Don't say where you are. Just listen." Richardson kept his voice low, his eyes on the laundromat's front windows. A police car rolled past outside, slow and searching. "Teresa sold us out. Marco's dead. The triads are moving on the docks tonight. I need to know who's still clean." Jesus. Lee's breathing changed, faster now. "Half the crew's been acting weird all week. Taking calls in private, disappearing during shifts. I thought it was just," he stopped. "How bad is it?" "Bad enough that I'm calling you from a burner." "Who do you trust?" "Not who you like." "Who would take a bullet?" Lee thought for a moment. Richardson could hear voices in the background, the sound of machinery, the normal operations of a business that was about to burn. "Danny Kim. He's clean. Victor Reyes, maybe. His brother's sick, needs the medical insurance, won't risk his job. And old man Chen. He hates the triads more than he likes money." 3 people, Richardson said. "Out of 50. 3 people I'd bet my life on," Lee corrected. "Everyone else, I don't know anymore." Richardson closed his eyes. He had built this organization carefully, promoted people based on loyalty and skill, paid them well, treated them better than the competition. And in one night, Teresa had turned it all into paper. "Call them. Tell them to meet at the secondary warehouse on 47th. Not the main docks. Tell them midnight. Tell them to come alone and armed." "What are we doing, boss?" "Taking it back." Richardson ended the call and immediately pulled the battery from the phone. Sophia was already opening the second burner. She handed it to him without a word. He dialed again, a different number, one he had not called in 3 years. "Who's this?" A woman's voice, sharp and awake despite the early hour. "Carmen Ruiz. She ran the money, cleaned it, moved it, made sure the IRS never looked too close." "It's Richardson." "That's impossible," Carmen said flatly. "Richardson's dead. His wife just called me an hour ago, crying, said there was an accident at the docks. Very tragic. Very sudden. Do I sound dead?" A pause. Then Carmen laughed, low and bitter. "You sound like a man having a very bad night. Teresa's trying to kill me. Marco's already dead. I need to know if she's touched the accounts. She tried. Came at me with forged signatures, some story about you being incapacitated, needing to transfer emergency funds. I told her I'd need to verify in person." Carmen's voice hardened. "I don't do business with wives. I do business with you. You want your money moved, you come tell me yourself." Richardson felt something loosen in his chest. Carmen was clean. Carmen was still his. "Don't transfer anything. Don't sign anything. If she comes back, stall her." "How long?" 24 hours. If I'm not back by then, assume I'm actually dead and do what you need to do. And if you are back? Then we're going to need a lot of cash. Unmarked. Fast." Carmen was quiet for a moment. "You know where to find me." Richardson killed the call and pulled the battery. 2 phones down. He looked at Sophia. She was watching him with that same steady expression, evaluating, calculating. She had been doing this for 6 months, he realized. Building networks, tracking movements, preparing for a moment like this. "How many more calls do you need to make?" she asked. "1, Richardson said. "Maybe 2. I need a weapons dealer who doesn't ask questions. And I need someone who can move fast at the docks without being seen." Sophia reached into her bag and pulled out a 3rd phone, already activated. "I know someone. A cousin who runs freight. He owes me a favor. And as for weapons..." She paused, almost embarrassed. "Mrs. Patterson's son. The one with the gun. He used to sell them, back before he went straight. He might still have connections. Richardson stared at her. You're putting together my counterstrike using your neighbors. Your people sold you out, Sophia said simply. Mine didn't. She was right. The Dragon of Chicago was about to reclaim his empire using a Maid's black notebook, burner phones from a drugstore, and an arsenal borrowed from the South Side. Richardson made the calls. By dawn, they had an army of 4. By midnight, they would have a war. The docks at midnight were a cathedral of rust and shadow, shipping containers stacked like metal tombs, the Chicago River sliding past black and silent. Richardson crouched behind a forklift in the secondary warehouse, watching the main entrance through a pair of binoculars Sophia had borrowed from her cousin. His body still ached from the poison, from the fight, from a night that had aged him a decade. But his mind was clear now, sharp with purpose. Sophia knelt beside him, a radio pressed to her ear. She was listening to a frequency Richardson did not know existed, a channel the cleaning crews and dock workers used to coordinate shifts and warn each other about surprise inspections. Now it was his intelligence network. They're here, Sophia whispered. 3 cars. Teresa's in the middle one. Fong is with her. I count 8 guards total, maybe more in the trucks behind them. Richardson adjusted the binoculars. He could see the headlights now, cutting through the fog that rolled off the water. The cars pulled up to the main warehouse, the one Teresa thought he would run to, the one that still had his name on the paperwork. He watched Teresa step out, wrapped in a long black coat, her hair pulled back. She looked impatient, checking her watch. Fong emerged from the other side, flanked by 2 triad enforcers in dark suits. Where's the body? Teresa's voice carried across the empty lot, sharp and irritated. Marco said he had it. Where is he? One of the guards stepped forward, nervous. We lost contact with Marco 4 hours ago. His phone's off. His partner too. Teresa's face went cold. Find them. Now. Richardson lowered the binoculars and keyed the radio Sophia had given him. Lee. You in position? North side, ready. Lee's voice crackled through. Danny's on the roof with the rifle. Victor's covering the rear exit. Good. Wait for my signal. Sophia's radio buzzed. A woman's voice, older, calm. This is Diana. I've got eyes on the trucks. 4 men inside, armed with automatics. They're not moving yet. Diana. One of the night shift cleaning supervisors, a woman who had worked these docks for 20 years and knew every shadow, every blind spot. She was parked in a maintenance van 200 yards away, watching through a telephoto lens. Another voice came through, younger, male. Miguel here. I'm in the security booth. I can kill the lights on your word, boss. Miguel. A janitor's son who had learned the electrical systems while helping his father wire the buildings. He had volunteered without hesitation when Sophia called, said he owed Richardson for the job his father still had. This was his army. Not soldiers. Not enforcers. Cleaners and dock workers and freight runners. The people no one saw. The people Teresa had dismissed as irrelevant. Richardson keyed the radio again. Miguel. Cut the main warehouse lights. Leave the perimeter on. I want them blind but not panicked. Copy that. The lights inside the main warehouse died. Teresa spun toward the building, her hand going to her coat. Fong barked something in Mandarin and his men drew their weapons. The guards fanned out, moving toward the darkened entrance. Now they're scared, Sophia said quietly. Now they're making mistakes. Richardson stood, his legs steadier than they had been hours ago. Lee. Move in from the north. Don't shoot unless they shoot first. I want Teresa alive. Understood. He turned to Sophia. She was holding her revolver again, reloaded, ready. You don't have to do this part, he said. You've done enough. I'm not letting you walk out there alone, Sophia said. You're still poisoned. You can barely stand. And you're about to face the woman who tried to kill you. She checked her weapon and looked at him with those sharp, unflinching eyes. I didn't save you twice just to watch you die now. Richardson almost smiled. Almost. They moved together through the container yard, using the metal boxes as cover. Richardson could hear Teresa shouting orders, her voice carrying across the lot. The guards were spreading out, searching, confused. They had expected a corpse. They had found a trap. Lee appeared from the north side, Danny and Victor behind him. They moved like ghosts, low and fast. Old Man Chen emerged from a storage shed on the east side, a shotgun in his weathered hands. One by one, Richardson's people closed the circle. Teresa stood in the center, finally realizing she was surrounded. Richardson stepped into the light, his hood pulled back, his tattoos visible again. The Dragon of Chicago, risen from the dead. Teresa's face went white. That's impossible. You made a mistake, Richardson said, his voice carrying across the silent docks. You thought the people you didn't see couldn't hurt you. You forgot that invisible doesn't mean powerless. Sophia stepped beside him, her revolver aimed at Fong. The cleaning supervisor, the janitor's son, the freight runners, the dock workers, they all emerged from the shadows, surrounding Teresa's crew. Not soldiers. Not trained killers. Just people who had been watching. Waiting. Learning. Teresa looked at Sophia, recognition finally dawning. You. The maid. The analyst, Sophia corrected. Fong reached for his weapon. Danny's rifle cracked from the roof. The bullet took Fong in the shoulder, spinning him to the ground. The other guards froze, realizing they were outgunned, outmaneuvered, beaten by people they had never bothered to count. Richardson walked forward, slow and deliberate, until he stood face to face with his wife. It's over, Teresa. She looked at him with something like disbelief, like she still could not understand how the man she had poisoned was standing in front of her. You should be dead. I was, Richardson said. And then someone who actually saw me brought me back. Teresa left Chicago on a cargo ship bound for Shanghai 3 days later, carrying nothing but a single suitcase and a passport that was not her own. Richardson had given her a choice, disappear or die. She chose disappearing. Fong Lu went back to the triads in a body bag, a message delivered without words. The lieutenants who had taken Teresa's money were given the same choice. Most of them ran. 2 did not run fast enough. Richardson spent those 3 days in a hotel room under a name no one knew, sleeping for 18 hours straight while the poison finally worked its way out of his system. When he woke, Sophia was sitting in the chair by the window, her notebook open on her lap, reorganizing what was left of his empire on paper. How bad is it? He asked, his voice still rough. Bad, Sophia said without looking up. But not unfixable. Lee's holding the docks. Carmen moved the clean money offshore. The triads are in chaos without Fong. The other families are waiting to see what you do next. She closed the notebook and finally met his eyes. They're waiting to see if the dragon is still alive or if he died on those docks. Richardson sat up slowly. His body still ached, but the fog in his head was gone. What do you think? I think the old dragon died, Sophia said. The one who trusted the wrong people. The one who thought loyalty could be bought. The one who didn't see what was happening in his own house. She paused. But maybe a different one survived. Richardson nodded. He understood. He could not go back to being the man who walked through his mansion without seeing the people who kept it running. He could not rebuild on blindness and arrogance. If he wanted to keep what he had, he needed to change how he ruled. I'm going back to the house today, he said. Will you come with me? Sophia looked at him for a long moment. In what capacity? Whatever capacity you want. Richardson stood, moved to the window, looked out at the city he had claimed as his own. You saved my life. You mapped my enemies. You built an intelligence network from scratch using nothing but patience and a notebook. You did in 6 months what my entire security team couldn't do in 6 years. He turned to face her. I need someone I can trust. Someone who actually sees what's happening. Someone who doesn't just tell me what I want to hear. You need an advisor, Sophia said carefully. Not a maid. I need you to run my intelligence operations. Track threats, monitor my people, make sure no one ever gets that close again. Richardson crossed his arms. It pays better than cleaning. And you can bring your daughter to the house. She can have her own room. Good schools. Safety. Sophia was quiet. She looked down at her notebook, at the pages filled with her careful handwriting, the evidence of months spent protecting herself and, eventually, protecting him. And if I say no? Then I pay you enough to disappear somewhere safe, and I try to rebuild without you. But I won't last long. Richardson's voice was honest, stripped of pride. I was blind, Sophia. I need someone who can see. Sophia closed the notebook and stood. Then let's go home. They drove to the mansion in Sophia's beat-up sedan, the same car Richardson had hidden in 2 nights ago. The gate rolled open. The driveway was clear. The house looked the same as it always had, elegant and cold and empty of truth. But when Richardson walked through the front door this time, he did not head straight to his study. He did not pour himself whiskey. He did not pretend everything was as it should be. Instead, he walked to the dining room, the one with the long table where he used to host dinners for people who smiled while planning his death. He pulled out a chair at the head of the table, then moved to the chair beside it and pulled that out too. Sophia stood in the doorway, watching him. Sit, Richardson said. We have work to do. Sophia walked forward and sat in the chair beside his, the chair that used to belong to Teresa, the chair that signified power and proximity and trust. She set her notebook on the table, opened it to a clean page, and looked at him with those sharp, unflinching eyes. First priority, she said. We audit every single person in this organization. From the top down. Anyone who took Teresa's money, anyone who knew and said nothing, anyone who hesitated when it mattered. They're gone. Agreed, Richardson said. What else? We rebuild the staff network. Not as servants. As intelligence. Every driver, every cleaner, every person who moves through this world without being seen, they become our eyes. We train them. We pay them well. We make them understand they're not invisible anymore. They're essential. Richardson nodded slowly. It was a complete restructuring, a dismantling of everything he thought he knew about power. But Sophia was right. The people he had ignored were the ones who had saved him. The people he had dismissed were the ones who saw the truth. And third, Sophia continued, her voice steady, you stop pretending you're untouchable. You stop trusting people just because they've been around a long time. You stop assuming loyalty means anything without proof. She looked at him directly. You learn to see what I see. Or this happens again. Richardson met her gaze. Then teach me. Sophia held his eyes for a moment, measuring him, deciding if he meant it. Then she nodded and turned to a fresh page in her notebook. The Dragon of Chicago had died on the docks. But something new was being born at this table. An empire built not on fear or blind loyalty, but on sight. On truth. On the partnership between a man who had lost everything and a woman who had been watching all along. Richardson looked at Sophia, her hand moving across the page, already 3 steps ahead, already planning, and realized he had been wrong about power his entire life. It was never about who feared you. It was about who saw you. And who you finally learned to see. Now we want to hear from you. Please comment where you are watching from and tell us what you learned from this story. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, subscribe to the channel and share it with someone who needs this message today. And if you want more stories from us, comment more stories and you will be the first to get the next emotional stories. Before you go, answer these 3 questions in the comments. 1. If you were Richardson, would you have trusted Sophia from the beginning, or would you have suspected her too? 2. Do you think Sophia should stay as Richardson's advisor, or should she take the money and disappear with her daughter? 3. What is one lesson this story taught you about power and the people we overlook every day?